Here is a question that will bother you for the rest of the day. If every single bank on earth opened its doors tomorrow and everyone walked in asking for their money back, at the same time, the entire global banking system would collapse before lunch. Not because someone stole the money, not because the banks went bankrupt, but because the money was never really there to begin with. Welcome to the greatest magic trick in human history. Welcome to money. You have been told a story about money since you were a child. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, people bartered. A farmer would trade eggs for shoes. A blacksmith would trade tools for bread. But barter was clunky and inefficient. What if the baker didn't need tools? So one day, smart humans invented coins, then paper, then banks, then credit cards. And here we are. It's a clean, logical story. Every economics textbook opens with it. It is also almost entirely fiction. In 2011, anthropologist David Graeber published a book called Debt, the First 5,000 Years, and it cracked the foundation of everything mainstream economics taught about money. He went to the historical record, the actual clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest civilizations on Earth, dating back to 3,500 BCE, and what he found destroyed the barter myth completely. Credit came first. Debt came first. People were running sophisticated loan systems, tracking obligations in temple ledgers, calculating interest, and issuing grain receipts for thousands of years before a single coin was ever stamped. The very first money was not a gold coin someone invented to make trading easier. It was a written promise, an IOU, a piece of clay that said, "You owe me," which means money, at its deepest root, is not a thing. It is a relationship. It is trust made physical, and that changes everything about how you understand the world. So what actually is money? Here is the most honest definition you will ever hear. Money is a shared story that enough people believe in. Consider the island of Yap in Micronesia. For centuries, the people of Yap used enormous stone discs called rye as their money, some as large as 4 meters across, weighing 4 tons. Here is the beautiful, completely insane part. They didn't move them to complete transactions. If you paid someone for a boat using a giant stone that was literally sitting at the bottom of the ocean because it sank during transport a century ago, that was still considered valid payment. Everyone on the island simply agreed that you now owned the stone. The stone didn't move. The belief moved. That stone at the bottom of the ocean had value because the community accepted the story that it had value. And if you think that sounds primitive and amusing, consider the $20 bill in your wallet. It is a piece of cotton and linen worth less than 10 cents to manufacture. The only reason you can trade it for a meal is because millions of other people have agreed, without being asked, to believe the same story about it. The moment enough people stop believing. Think Zimbabwe, 2008, Germany, 1923, Venezuela, 2018. The money becomes toilet paper and the prices become nightmares. This is not metaphor. This is the mechanism. Money is a collective fiction. The most powerful collective fiction our species has ever created. And like all fictions, whoever gets to write the story gets to decide who wins. Which brings us to a private island off the coast of Georgia, November 1910. And the story that was never supposed to be told. 6 men boarded a train in New Jersey using only their first names, no last names, under strict orders of secrecy. They had borrowed guns to pretend they were going duck hunting. Among them, Senator Nelson Aldrich, the most powerful Republican in the United States Senate with direct family ties to the Rockefeller Empire, Henry Davison, senior partner at J.P. Morgan, Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank, the institution that would one day become Citibank, and Paul Warburg, a German-born banking genius who had been quietly lobbying for a central bank for years. They met at the Jekyll Island Club, described by Munsey's magazine in 1904 as the richest, the most exclusive, the most inaccessible club in the world. They stayed for a week. They worked in secret. And in that week, they drafted the legislation that would become the Federal Reserve Act, signed into law in December 1913. The participants didn't even admit the meeting had taken place until the 1930s, 2 full decades later. Think about what that means. The institution that controls the money supply of the world's largest economy, the entity that decides interest rates, prints dollars, and bails out banks, was designed in secret by the very bankers it was supposedly meant to regulate on a private island that the public couldn't even visit. You'd be forgiven for thinking this sounds conspiratorial. The Federal Reserve's own official history page confirms the meeting happened exactly as described. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy fact. Now here is where it gets even stranger, because once you understand what the Federal Reserve actually does, you realize the game has been running the whole time. When the government needs money, it doesn't just print it outright. Instead, the Treasury issues bonds, essentially IOUs that say, the government will pay you back later with interest. The Federal Reserve buys those bonds, and in exchange, creates creates new money out of thin air. Literally nothing becomes billions of dollars. This is not a metaphor. The Fed doesn't open a vault. It changes a number in a computer. New money enters the system. Here's the question no one asks in school. Where does the money to pay the interest come from? It doesn't exist yet. It has to be borrowed into existence, too, which means the system, by its very design, always creates more debt than it creates money. The world economy is, structurally, a treadmill of debt that must perpetually expand or collapse. This isn't incompetence. This is architecture. And then on August 15th, 1971, things got truly interesting. Millions of Americans were home watching television when President Richard Nixon appeared on screen. He spoke for 15 minutes. He was calm, even cheerful. He announced what he called a new economic policy. In those 15 minutes, he severed the US dollar from gold entirely, ending the Bretton Woods Agreement, which had promised since 1944 that foreign governments could exchange their dollars for gold at $35 per ounce. France had already figured out something was wrong and had sent a warship to New York to collect its gold. Nixon closed the window before others could do the same. He called it temporary. It was permanent. That night, for the first time in human history, the world's reserve currency became backed by nothing but belief. Not gold, not silver, not any physical thing at all. Just the word of a government. And since 1971, the dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. An ounce of gold that cost $35 in 1971 costs over $3,000 today. The math is not complicated. The money is telling you the truth, even when the politicians won't. But here is the part of this story that should genuinely enrage you, and it has a name, a very specific, very old name, the Cantillon effect. Richard Cantillon was an Irish-French economist who wrote his masterwork around 1730. He had a simple observation. When new money is created, it doesn't reach everyone at the same time. It flows outward from its source, like a wave, and whoever is closest to the source benefits most, before prices have a chance to rise. By the time the new money reaches ordinary people, in the form of wages, savings adjustments, or consumer prices, those prices have already climbed. The people at the center got to buy assets and goods at yesterday's prices. You get to buy them at tomorrow's prices, using the same money that was worth less. In the 1700s, the people closest to the king got the new money first. In 2008, after the financial crisis, the Federal Reserve created $4.5 trillion. Banks received it first. They bought stocks and real estate. Asset prices soared. By 2020, the Fed created another $6 trillion in pandemic response. Same story. The stock market, which is primarily owned by the wealthy, broke records, while unemployment queues stretched around city blocks. Since 2008, the money supply has risen by over 150%. Real median wages over the same period? Up less than 10%. The top 0.1% of US households now own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. This is not an accident of history. This is the Cantillon effect, running exactly as designed. In 1985, baby boomers bought homes at roughly 3 times their household income. Today, millennials and Gen Z face ratios of 8 to 10 times their income. The ladder wasn't pulled up by accident. The money system built a ladder with only some rungs. Milton Friedman put it plainly, inflation is taxation without legislation. You never voted for it. You never saw the bill. But every year, silently, a portion of your savings evaporates, transferred to whoever was closest to the printing press. And here's where it gets deeply personal. Because even if you understand all of this, even if you can see the system clearly, you are still fighting against your own brain. Your brain was not built for money. It was built for survival on the African savannah 200,000 years ago. And on the savannah, the most dangerous thing that could happen to you was losing something, losing shelter, losing food, losing your tribe. So evolution wired your brain to feel losses, approximately twice as painfully as it feels equivalent gains. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky called this loss aversion, and it is one of the most replicated findings in behavioral science. Think about what this does to your financial decisions. Your brain does not process saving money as gaining security. It processes it as losing spending power right now, today. The future version of you who benefits from the savings feels abstract and distant. The dopamine hit from buying something feels real and immediate. Shopping literally releases the same chemical in your brain that cocaine does. Not because you're weak, because you're human. The retailers, the app designers, the credit card companies, they know this. They have entire departments dedicated to exploiting it. And then there is the hedonic treadmill. Studies consistently show that above a basic level of comfort, more money does not make you meaningfully happier. You get a raise. You feel great for 3 months. Then you adapt. Your reference point shifts. Now you need more to feel the same. You buy the bigger house. You adapt. You need a bigger house again. You are running on a treadmill, spending your life chasing a feeling that keeps resetting, funding a lifestyle that signals wealth without building it. Here is a brutal, counterintuitive distinction that changes everything. The people who look rich, and the people who are rich are very often entirely different people. The person driving the luxury car and living in the oversized house may be mortgaged to their eyeballs, one job loss from disaster. The person driving the ordinary car, living in the modest house, may be quietly compounding wealth at a rate that will make their grandchildren comfortable. The greatest trick consumer culture ever pulled was making you optimize for appearing wealthy instead of becoming wealthy. So here is the real question. If the system extracts from you through inflation, if the Cantillon effect tilts the table toward those near the money printer, if your own brain is wired against long-term thinking, what do you actually do? First, understand what money is, a tool for storing and transferring time and energy. When you trade your hours for dollars, you are converting your irreplaceable life energy into a token. The question is not, how do I make more money? The question is, how do I stop letting my stored life energy erode? Because in a world of persistent inflation, cash is a melting ice cube. Holding it is a guaranteed slow loss. Second, understand the fundamental difference between assets and liabilities. An asset puts money into your pocket over time. A liability takes money out. Most of what consumer culture wants you to buy is a liability, wearing the costume of a reward. Your salary is your employer buying your time. Assets are how you buy other people's time, or the market's time, to work for you. Third, understand compound interest. Albert Einstein allegedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he said it or not, the math is miraculous. $1,000 invested at 10% annually becomes $17,449 in 30 years without you touching it. But here is the catch. Time is the critical ingredient. The person who starts at 25 arrives at 65 with more than 4 times the wealth of the person who starts at 35. Not because they're smarter, but because they started a decade earlier. Every year you delay is not just 1 year. It is exponentially more. Fourth, recognize that the Cantillon effect can be partially escaped. The wealthy survive inflation because they own assets, real estate, equities, businesses, whose prices rise with the money supply. When the Fed prints money, asset prices go up. If you own assets, your net worth rises with the tide. If you only hold cash and wages, inflation silently eats you. This is why Jack Bogle's invention of the low-cost index fund in 1975 is one of the most genuinely democratizing financial events of the 20th century. For the first time, an ordinary person with ordinary income could own a fractional piece of the entire economy, capturing the same asset appreciation that the wealthy had always monopolized for as little as a cup of coffee a day. Fifth, and most importantly, financial literacy is not taught in schools because the system does not benefit from you having it. The best investment you will make in your entire life is not a stock, not a property. It is the hours you spend understanding how money actually works, what it is, who controls it, and how its rules can be used by you instead of against you. Knowledge, unlike money, cannot be inflated away. Here is the picture from the top. Money began as a story, as credit, as trust, as clay tablets in ancient temples. It was weaponized by kings, then by bankers, then by central banks. In 1910, 6 men on a private island designed the architecture of financial power that still governs your life today. In 1971, the last tether to the physical world was cut, and money became pure belief, which means it can be manufactured in unlimited quantities, always finding its way to those closest to the source. Your brain was then sold a lifestyle that keeps you spending, keeps you consuming, keeps you on the hedonic treadmill, and keeps you in the debt that the system requires to survive. This is not a doom story. It is a map, because once you see the map, you can navigate it differently. You stop competing with neighbors over symbols of wealth and start quietly building actual wealth. You stop letting inflation passively eat your savings and start owning assets. You stop spending tomorrow's security on today's dopamine hit. You start treating money not as a reward for working, but as a tool for buying your own freedom back. Here is the deepest secret about money that the system does not want you to internalize. Money is just a story, and at any moment, you can decide to tell yourself a different one. The stone at the bottom of the ocean had value because everyone agreed it did. Your financial life has the shape it has because of stories you have inherited and never questioned, about what success looks like, about what you deserve, about how wealth is built, about who the system is designed to serve. Question the stories, learn the rules, play the game that actually exists, not the one you were told about, because the most powerful thing in the world is not money. It is understanding money before money understands you.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money